Gears are grinning,
John Arnold said in the darkened control room.
Have maintenance check the electric cluster on vehicle BB4 and BB5 when they come back.
Yes, Mr. Arnold.
A minor detail, Hammond said, walking in the room. Looking out, he could see the two Land Cruisers moving south through the park. Muldoon stood in the corner, silently watching. There are no minor details, Mr. Hammond,
he said, and he lit another cigarette. Nervous at most times, Arnold was especially edgy now, aware that this was the first time visitors had actually toured the park. In fact, Arnold's team didn't often go into the park. Harding, the vet, sometimes did. The animal handlers went to the individual feeding houses, but otherwise they watched the park from the control room. And now, with visitors out there, he worried about 100 details. John Arnold was a systems engineer who had worked on the Polaris submarine missile in the late 1960s, until he had his first child and the prospect of making weapons became too distasteful. Meanwhile, Disney had started to create amusement park rides of great technological sophistication, and they employed a lot of aerospace people. Arnold helped build Disney World in Orlando, and had gone on to implement major parks at Magic Mountain in California, Old Country in Virginia, and Astroworld in Houston. His continuous employment at parks had eventually given him a somewhat skewed view of reality. Arnold contended, only half-jokingly, that the entire world was increasingly described by the metaphor of the theme park. Paris is a theme park, he once announced after a vacation, although it's too expensive, and the park employees are unpleasant and sullen. For the past 2 years, Arnold's job had been to get Jurassic Park up and running. As an engineer, he was accustomed to long time schedules. He often referred to the September opening, by which he meant September of the following year. And as the September opening approached, he was unhappy with the progress that had been made. He knew from experience that it sometimes took years to work the bugs out of a single park ride, let alone get a whole park running properly.
You're just a worrier, Hammond said. I don't think so, Arnold said. You got to realize that from an engineering standpoint, Jurassic Park is by far the most ambitious theme park in history. Visitors will never think about it, but I do.
He ticked the points off on his fingers.
First, Jurassic Park has all the problems of any amusement park. Ride maintenance, queuing control, transportation, food handling, living accommodations, trash disposal, security. Second, we have all the problems of major zoo. Care of the animals' health and welfare, feeding and cleanliness, protection from insects, pests, allergies, and illnesses, maintenance of barriers, and all the rest. And finally, we have the unprecedented problem of caring for the population of animals that no one has ever tried to maintain before. Oh, it's not as bad as all that, Hammond said. Yes, it is. You're just not here to see it. The Tyrannosaurs drink the lagoon water and sometimes get sick. We aren't sure why. The Triceratops female kill each other in fights for dominance and have to be separated into groups smaller than 6. We don't know why. The Stegosaurs frequently get blisters on their tongue and diarrhea, for reasons no one yet understands, even though we have lost 2. The Hypsilophodon gets skin rashes, and the Velociraptors... Let's not start on the Velociraptors, Hammond said. I'm sick of hearing about the Velociraptors. How they're the most fiercest creatures anyone has ever seen. They are, Muldoon said in a low voice. They should all be destroyed. You wanted to fit them with radio collars, and I agreed. Yes, and they promptly chew the collars off. But even if the raptors never get free, I think we have to accept that Jurassic Park is inherently a hazard. Oh, balls! Whose side are you on, anyway? We now have 15 species of extinct animals, and most of them are dangerous, Arnold said. We have been forced to display the Jungle River ride because of the Dilophosaurus, and the Pteratop Lodge in the aviary, because the pterodactyls are so unpredictable. These aren't engineering delays, Mr. Hammond. They're problems with control of the animals. You have had plenty of engineering delays, Hammond said. Don't blame it on the animals. Yes, we have. In fact, it's all we could do to get the main attraction park drive working correctly, to get the CD-ROMs inside the cars to control by the monitor sensors. It's taken weeks to adjust to get the working properly. And now the electric gears on the car are acting up. The gear shifts. Let's keep it in perspective, Hammond said. You get your engineering correct and the animals will fall into place. After all, they are trainable.
From the beginning, this had been one of the core beliefs of the planners. The animals, however exotic, would fundamentally behave like animals in zoos anywhere. They would learn the regularities of their care, and they would respond.
Meanwhile, how's the computer? Hammond said. He glanced at Dennis Nedry, who was working at the terminal in the corner of the room. This damn computer has always been a headache. We're getting there, Nedry said. If he had done it right in the first place, Hammond began, but Arnold put a restraining hand on his arm. Arnold knew there was no point in antagonizing Nedry while he was working. It's a large system, Arnold said. There are bound to be glitches.
In fact, the bug list now ran to more than 130 items, and included many odd aspects. For example, the animal feeding program reset itself every 12 hours, not every 24 hours, and would not record feedings on Sundays. As a result, the staff could not accurately measure how much the animals were eating. The security system, which controlled all the security card-operated doors, cut out whenever main power was lost and did not come back on with auxiliary power. The security program only ran with main power. The physical conservation program, intended to dim lights after 10 p.m., only worked on alternate days of the week. The automated fecal analysis, called auto poop, designed to check for parasites in the animal stools, invariably recorded all specimens as having the parasite Plagostomum venulosum, although none did. The program then automatically dispensed medication into the animal's food. If the handlers dumped the medicine out of the hoppers to prevent its being dispensed, an alarm sounded, which could not be turned off. And so it went, page after page of errors. When he had arrived, Dennis Nedry had been under the impression that he could make all the fixes himself over the weekend. He had paled when he saw the full listing. Now he was calling his office in Cambridge, telling his staff programmers they were going to have to cancel their weekend plans and work overtime until Monday. And he had told John Arnold that he would need to use every telephone link between Isla Nublar and the mainland just to transfer program data back and forth to his programmers. While Nedry worked, Arnold punched up a new window in his own monitor. It allowed him to see what Nedry was doing at the corner console. Not that he didn't trust Nedry, but Arnold just liked to know what was going on. He looked at the graphics display on his right-hand console, which showed the progress of the electric land cruisers. They were following the river, just north of the aviary and the Ornithischian Paddock. If you look to your left, you will see the dome of the Jurassic Park aviary, which is not yet finished for visitors. Tim saw sunlight glinting off aluminum struts in the distance. And directly below is our Mesozoic jungle river, where, if you are lucky, you just may catch a glimpse of a very rare carnivore. Keep your eyes peeled, everyone. Inside the Land Cruiser, the screen showed a bird-like head topped with a flaming red crest. But everyone in Tim's car was looking out the windows. The car was driving along a high ridge, overlooking a fast mover below. The river was almost enclosed by dense foliage on both sides. "There they are now," said the voice. "The animals you see are called Dilophosaurs." Despite what the recording said, Tim saw only one. The Dilophosaur crouched on its hind legs by the river, drinking. It was built on the basic carnivore pattern with a heavy tail, strong hind limbs, and a long neck. Its 10-foot-tall body was spotted yellow and black like a leopard. But it was the head that held Tim's attention. Two broad, curving crests ran along the top of the head from the eyes to the nose. The crests met in the center, making a V shape above the dinosaur's head. The crests had red and black stripes, reminiscent of a parrot or toucan.
They're pretty.
Dilophosaurus is one of the earliest carnivorous dinosaurs. Scientists thought their jaws were too weak to kill prey, and imagined they were primarily scavengers, but now we know they are poisonous.
Hey, Tim grinned. All right.
Lex shifted uneasily in her seat.
Are they really poisonous, Mr. Regis? Don't worry about it, Ed Regis said. But are they? Well, yes, Lex.
Along with such living reptiles as Gila monsters and rattlesnakes, Dilophosaurus secretes a hematotoxin from glands in its mouth. Unconsciousness follows within minutes of a bite. The dinosaur will then finish the victim off at its leisure, making Dilophosaurus a beautiful but deadly addition to the animals you see here at Jurassic Park. The Land Cruiser turned a corner, leaving the river behind. Tim looked back, hoping for a last glimpse of the Dilophosaur. This was amazing. Poisonous dinosaurs. He wished he could stop the car, but everything was automatic. He bet Dr. Grant wanted to stop the car, too. If you look on the bluff to the right, you'll see Les Gigantes, the site of our superb 3-star dining room. Chef Alain Richard hails from the world-famous Le Beaumanière in France. Make your reservations by dialing 4 from your hotel rooms. Tim looked up on the bluff and saw nothing.
Not for a while, though, Ed Regis said. The restaurant won't even start construction until November.
Continuing on our prehistoric safari, we come next to the herbivores of the Ornithischian group. If you look to your right, you can probably see them now. Tim saw 2 animals standing motionless in the shade of a large tree. Triceratops, the size and gray color of an elephant, with the truculent stance of a rhino. The horns above each eye curved 5 feet into the air, looking almost like inverted elephant tusks. A third rhino-like horn was located near the nose, and they had the beaky snout of a rhino. Unlike other dinosaurs, Triceratops serratus can't see well. They're nearsighted like the rhinos of today, and they tend to be surprised by moving objects. They'd charge our car if they were close enough to see it, but relax, folks. We're safe enough here. Triceratops have a fan-shaped crest behind their heads. It's made of solid bone, and it's very strong. These animals weigh about 7 tons each. Despite their appearance, they are actually quite docile. They know their handlers, and they'll allow themselves to be petted. They particularly like to be scratched in the hindquarters.
Why don't they move? Hey! Stupid dinosaur! Move! Don't bother the animals, Lex, Ed Regis said. Why? It's stupid! They just sit there like a picture in a book.
Easy-going monsters from a bygone world stand in sharp contrast to what we will see next. The most famous predator in the history of the world. The mighty Tyrant Lizard, known as Tyrannosaurus Rex.
Good. Tyrannosaurus Rex, Tim said. I hope he's better than these bozos, Lex said, turning away from the Triceratops.
The Land Cruiser rumbled forward. The mighty tyrannosaurs arose late in dinosaur history. Dinosaurs ruled the Earth for 120 million years, but there were tyrannosaurs for only the last 15 million years of that period. The land cruisers had stopped at the rise of a hill. They overlooked a forested area sloping down to the edge of the lagoon. The sun was falling to the west, sinking into a misty horizon. The whole landscape of Jurassic Park was bathed in soft light, with lengthening shadows. The surface of the lagoon rippled in pink crescents. Farther south, they saw the graceful necks of the apatosaurs standing at the water's edge, their bodies mirrored in the moving surface. It was quiet, except for the soft drone of cicadas. As they stared out at that landscape, it was possible to believe that they had really been transported millions of years back in time to a vanished world.
It works, doesn't it? I like to come here sometime in the evening and just sit. Where is T-Rex? Good question. You often see the little one down in the lagoon. The lagoon is stocked, so we have fish in there. The little one has learned to catch the fish. Interesting how he does it. He doesn't use his hands, but he ducks his whole head on the water, like a bird. The little one? The little T-Rex. He's a juvenile, 2 years old and about a third grown now, standing 8 feet high, weighing 1.5 tons. The other one's a full-grown tyrannosaur, but I don't see him at the moment. Maybe he's down hunting the apatosaurs, Grant said. Regis laughed, his voice tiny over the radio. He would if he could, believe me. Sometimes he stands by at the lagoon and stares at those animals, wiggling those little forearms in his frustration. But the T-Rex territory is completely enclosed with trenches and fences. They're disguised from view,
but believe me, he can't go anywhere.
Then where is he?
Hiding. He's a little shy.
Shy, Malcolm said. Tyrannosaurus Rex is shy.
Well, he conceals himself as a general rule. You almost never see him out in the open, especially in daylight.
Why is that?
We think it's possible that he has sensitive skin and sunburns easily.
You're destroying a lot of illusions.
I don't think you'll be disappointed. Just wait. Any minute now.
Look at them, Hammond said, watching the control room monitor. Leaning out of the window so eager. They can't wait to see it. They have come for the danger. That's what I'm afraid of, Muldoon said. He twirled the keys on his fingers and watched the land cruisers tensely. This was the first time that visitors had toured Jurassic Park, and Muldoon shared Arnold's apprehensions.
Robert Muldoon was a big man, 50 years old, with a steel-gray mustache and deep blue eyes. Raised in Kenya, he had spent most of his life as a guide for African big game hunters, as had his father before him. But since 1980, he had worked principally for conservation groups and zoo designers as a wildlife consultant. He had become well known. An article in the London Sunday Times had said, "What Robert Trent Jones is to golf courses, Robert Muldoon is to zoos, a designer of unsurpassed knowledge and skill." In 1986, he had done some work for a San Francisco company that was building a private wildlife park on an island in North America. Muldoon had laid out the boundaries for different animals, defining space and habitat requirements for lions, elephants, zebras, and hippos, identifying which animals could be kept together and which had to be separated. At the time, it had been a fairly routine job. He had been more interested in an Indian park called Tiger World in southern Kashmir. Then, a year ago, he was offered a job as game warden of Jurassic Park. It coincided with a desire to leave Africa. The salary was excellent. Muldoon had taken it on for a year. He was astonished to discover the park was really a collection of genetically engineered prehistoric animals. It was, of course, interesting work, but during his years in Africa, Muldoon had developed an unblinking view of animals, an unromantic view, that frequently set him at odds with the Jurassic Park management in California, particularly the little martinet standing beside him in the control room. In Muldoon's opinion, cloning dinosaurs in a laboratory was one thing, maintaining them in the wild was quite another. It was Muldoon's view that some dinosaurs were too dangerous to be kept in a park setting. In part, the danger existed because they still knew so little about the animals. For example, nobody even suspected the Dilophosaurs were poisonous until they were observed hunting indigenous rats on the island, biting the rodents and then stepping back to wait for them to die. And even then, nobody suspected the Dilophosaurs could spit until one of the handlers was almost blinded by spitting venom. After that, Hammond had agreed to study Dilophosaur venom, which was found to contain 7 different toxic enzymes. It was also discovered that the Dilophosaurs could spit a distance of 50 feet. Since this raised the possibility that a guest in a car might be blinded, management decided to remove the poison sacs. The vets had tried twice on 2 different animals without success. No one knew where the poison was being secreted, and no one would ever know until an autopsy was performed on a Dilophosaur and management would not allow one to be killed. Muldoon worried even more about the velociraptors. They were instinctive hunters, and they never passed up prey. They killed even when they weren't hungry. They killed for the pleasure of killing. They were swift, strong runners and astonishing jumpers. They had lethal claws on all 4 limbs. One swipe of a forearm would disembowel a man, spilling his guts out. And they had powerful tearing jaws that ripped flesh instead of biting it. They were far more intelligent than the other dinosaurs, and they seemed to be natural cage breakers. Every zoo expert knew that certain animals were especially likely to get free of their cages. Some, like monkeys and elephants, could undo cage doors. Others, like wild pigs, were unusually intelligent and could lift gate fasteners with their snouts. But who would suspect that the giant armadillo was a notorious cage breaker? Or the moose? Yet a moose was almost as skillful with its snout as an elephant with its trunk. Moose were always getting free. They had a talent for it. And so did velociraptors. Raptors were at least as intelligent as chimpanzees. And like chimpanzees, they had agile hands that enabled them to open doors and manipulate objects. They could escape with ease. And when, as Muldoon had feared, one of them finally escaped, it killed 2 construction workers and maimed a third before being recaptured. After that episode, the visitor lodge had been reworked with heavy barred gates, a high perimeter fence, and tempered glass windows, and the raptor holding pen was rebuilt with electronic sensors to warn of another impending escape. Muldoon wanted guns as well, and he wanted shoulder-mounted law missile launchers. Hunters knew how difficult it was to bring down a 4-ton African elephant, and some of the dinosaurs weighed 10 times as much. Management was horrified, insisting there be no guns anywhere on the island. When Muldoon threatened to quit and to take his story to the press, a compromise was reached. In the end, 2 specially built laser-guided missile launchers were kept in a locked room in the basement. Only Muldoon had keys to the room. Those were the keys Muldoon was twirling now.
I'm going downstairs.
Arnold, watching the control screens, nodded. The 2 land cruisers sat at the top of the hill, waiting for the T-Rex to appear.
Hey, as long as you're up, get me a Coke, okay?
What's going to happen to the goat? Is he going to eat the goat? I think so.
He's here. She.
The goat was tethered in the center of the field 30 yards from the nearest trees. The dinosaur must be somewhere among the trees, but for a moment Grant could see nothing at all. Then he realized he was looking too low. The animal's head stood 20 feet above the ground, half concealed among the upper branches of the palm trees.
Oh my God. She is large as a bloody building.
Grant stared at the enormous square head, 5 feet long, mottled reddish-brown, with huge jaws and fangs. The Tyrannosaurus' jaws worked once, opening and closing, but the huge animal did not emerge from hiding.
How long will it wait? Maybe 3 or 4 minutes. Maybe... Can she see us?
Oh yes. Let's see if she's going to eat here in front of us, or if she's going to drag the prey away.
Like a bird, Ellie said. What is she afraid of? Probably another tyrannosaur.
Big carnivores like lions and tigers often became cautious after a kill, behaving as if suddenly exposed. 19th century zoologists imagined the animals felt guilty for what they had done, but contemporary scientists documented the effort behind a kill, hours of patient stalking before the final lunge, as well as the frequency of failure. The idea of nature red in tooth and claw was wrong. Most often the prey got away. When a carnivore finally brought down an animal, it was watchful for another predator who might attack it and steal its prize. Thus, this tyrannosaur was probably fearful of another tyrannosaur.
She's going to stay. Excellent. Ew, that's disgusting.
Ladies and gentlemen, Tyrannosaurus Rex, the tape said. The Land Cruiser started up, and moved silently off through the foliage. Malcolm sat back in his seat.
Fantastic, he said. Gennaro wiped his forehead. He looked pale.
Henry Wu came into the control room to find everyone sitting in the dark, listening to the voices on the radio.
Christ, if an animal like that gets out, there'd be no stopping it. No stopping it, no. Huge, with no natural enemies. My God, think about it.
Damn those people. They're so negative. They're still going on about an animal escaping? I don't understand. They must have seen by now that we have everything under control. We have engineered the animals and engineered the resort.
He shrugged. It was Wu's deepest perception that the park was fundamentally sound, as he believed his paleo DNA was fundamentally sound. Whatever problems might arise in the DNA were essentially point problems in the code, causing a specific problem in the phenotype, an enzyme that didn't switch on or a protein that didn't fold. Whatever the difficulty, it was always solved with a relatively minor adjustment in the next version. Similarly, he knew that Jurassic Park's problems were not fundamental problems. They were not control problems. Nothing as basic or as serious as the possibility of an animal escaping. Wu found it offensive to think that anyone would believe him capable of contributing to a system where such a thing could happen.
It's that Malcolm, Hammond said darkly. He's behind it all. He was against us from the start, you know. He's got his theories that complex system can't be controlled and nature can't be imitated. I don't know what his problem is. Hell, we're just making a zoo here. World's full of them, and they all worked fine. But he's going to prove his theory or die trying. I just hope he doesn't panic Gennaro into trying to shut the park down. Can he do that? No, but he can try. He can try and frighten the Japanese investors and get them to withdraw funds. Or he can make a stick with the San Jose government. He can make trouble. Arnold stubbed out his cigar. Let's wait and see what happens. We believe in the park. Let's see how it plays out.
Muldoon got off the elevator, nodded to the ground floor guard, and went downstairs to the basement. He flicked on the lights. The basement was filled with 24 Land Cruisers arranged in neat rows. These were the electric cars that would eventually form an endless loop, touring the park, returning to the visitor center. In the corner was a Jeep with a red stripe, one of 2 gasoline-powered vehicles. Harding, the vet, had taken the other that morning, which could go anywhere in the park, even among the animals. The Jeeps were painted with a diagonal red stripe because for some reason it discouraged the Triceratops from charging the car. Muldoon moved past the Jeep toward the back. The steel door to the armaments room was unmarked. He unlocked it with his key and swung the heavy door wide. Gun racks lined the interior. He pulled out a Randler's shoulder launcher and a case of canisters. He tucked 2 gray rockets under his other arm.
Looks like rain, Nedry just said, glancing at the sky.
The Land Cruisers had stopped again near the sauropod swamp. A large herd of apatosaurs was grazing at the edge of the lagoon, eating the leaves of the upper branches of the palm trees. In the same area were several duck-billed hadrosaurs, which in comparison looked much smaller. Of course, Tim knew the hadrosaurs weren't really small. It was only that the apatosaurs were so much larger. Their tiny heads reached 50 feet into the air, extending out on their long necks. The big animals you see are commonly called Verantosaurus, but they are actually Apatosaurus. They weigh more than 30 tons. That means a single animal is as big as a whole herd of modern elephants. And you may notice that their preferred area, alongside the lagoon, is not swampy. Despite what the books say, Verantosaurs avoid swamps. They prefer dry land.
Brontosaurus is the biggest dinosaur, Lex, Nedry just said.
Tim didn't bother to contradict him. Actually, Brachiosaurus was 3 times as large, and some people thought Altrosaurus and Seismosaurus were even larger than Brachiosaurus. Seismosaurus might have weighed 100 tons. Alongside the apatosaurs, the smaller hadrosaurs stood on their hind legs to get at foliage. They moved gracefully for such large creatures. Several infant hadrosaurs scampered around the adults, eating the leaves that dropped from the mouths of the larger animals. The dinosaurs of Jurassic Park don't breed, the recording said. The young animals you see were introduced a few months ago, already hatched, but the adults nurture them anyway.
Yeah, looks like rain, all right, Nedry just said. Hey, stop the car! What is it? Nedry just said. Quick, stop the car!
We move on now to see the last of our great prehistoric animals, the stegosaurs.
What's the matter, Tim? I saw one in the field out there. Saw what? A raptor! In that field!
The stegosaurs are a mid-Jurassic animal evolving about 170 million years ago. Several of these remarkable herbivores live here at Jurassic Park.
Oh, I don't think so, Tim. Not a raptor. I did! Stop the car!
There was a babble on the intercom as the news was relayed to Grant and Malcolm.
Tim said he saw a raptor. Where? Back at the field. Let's go back and look.
We can't go back. We can only go forward. The cars are programmed. You can't go back?
No, sorry. You see, it's kind of a ride.
Tim, this is Professor Malcolm. I have just one question for you about this raptor.
How old would you say it was? Older than the baby we saw today. And younger than the big adults in the pen. The adults were 6 feet tall. This one was about half that size.
That's fine.
I only saw it for a second, Tim said. I'm sure it wasn't a raptor, Nedry just said. It couldn't possibly be a raptor. Must have been one of the Aussies. They always jumping their fences. We have a hell of a time with them. I know I saw a raptor, Tim said. I'm hungry, Lex said. What do you think the kid saw? I think it must have been an Aussie. Arnold nodded. We have trouble tracking Aussies because they spend so much time in the trees.
The Aussies were an exception to the usual minute-to-minute control they maintained over the animals. The computers were constantly losing and picking up the Aussies as they went into the trees and then came down again.
What burns me is that we have made this wonderful park, this fantastic park, and our very first visitors are going through it like accountants, just looking for problems. They aren't experienced the wonder of it at all. That's their problem, Arnold said. We can't make them experience wonder.
The intercom clicked and Arnold heard a voice drawl. John, this is the NB over at the dock. We haven't finished offloading, but I'm looking at that storm pattern south of us. I'd rather not be tied up here if this chop gets any worse. Arnold turned to the monitor showing the cargo vessel, which was moored at the dock on the east side of the island. He pressed the radio button.
How much left to do, Jim?
Just the 3 final equipment containers. I haven't checked the manifest, but I assume you can wait another 2 weeks for it. We're not well berthed here, you know, and we're 100 miles offshore.
You're requesting permission to leave?
Yes, John.
I want that equipment, Hammond said. That's equipment for the labs. We need it. Yes, Arnold said. But you didn't want to put money into a storm barrier to protect the pier. So we don't have a good harbor. If the storm gets worse, the ship will be pounded against the dock. I have seen ship lost that way. Replacement of the vessel plus salvage to clear your dock. And you can't use your dock until you do. Hammond gave a dismissive way. Get them out of there. Permission to leave, MB, Arnold said into the radio.
See you in 2 weeks. On the video monitor, they saw the crew on the decks, casting off the lines. Arnold turned back to the main console bank. He saw the land cruisers moving through fields of steam.
Where are they now? Hammond said. It looks like the south fields, Arnold said.
The southern end of the island had more volcanic activity than the north.
That means they should be almost to the Stegos. I'm sure they'll stop and see what Harding is doing.